everyone, let's go ahead. Is my microphone even on? There we go. Everyone, let's go ahead and give a nice round of applause for Linda Kao. Linda, thank you so much for having your book debut here at Mysterious Galaxy. We're here to celebrate the release of A Crooked Mark, her debut novel. Linda grew up in California and spent many weekends hauling books from the library to read on the living room rug. She taught elementary school for several years before earning a graduate degree in education, and along the way, she discovered a love for writing fiction. Obviously, if you come out with a book, you would have to love it, right? She has published short stories and poems and highlights for children, Ladybug, Fun for Kids, and Boys Quest, and is a recipient of the SCBWI Sue Alexander Award. Thank you so much, Linda. And don't forget, everyone, if you are in person or watching live right now on the camera right there, you can still purchase any copies of A Crooked Mark. If you would like personalization tonight, make sure you give us a call so we can get those personalized. If not, we'll get signed copies for you. Thank you so much and enjoy the event, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I've been to events at Mysterious Galaxy before, and I sit there, and so it's a little surreal to be here. But I get to look out, and I see my writing group, and I see my family, and so many friends. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us if you are online. I appreciate that also. And thank you so much, Mysterious Galaxy. They have been phenomenal. They partnered with me for my pre-order campaign. They are so supportive of authors. And if you look around, they're great booksellers. They're fantastic books. So I hope you get a moment to browse. It's very nice here. When I first started thinking about what to say tonight, I got a little bit intimidated because usually it is me and my laptop and maybe my dog. And that's it. And so I started thinking that maybe I would tell a story. And I tell you the story about how I came to be a writer and where this book came from. And so I've listened to writers talk about how they have always wanted to be a writer, that they have filled these notebooks with stories and their parents have kept them and they've just kept at it and eventually they published a book. And so that is now me. When I was little, I had a dream. I was going to be, during the day, I would be a pilot. And then in the evenings, I would be a firefighter. And then on the weekends, I was going to be a farmer. So I became none of these because it turns out that in order to fly for the Air Force, you need 20/20 vision, which I do not have. I'm not brave enough to be a firefighter. And I tend to kill plants. So none of those worked out. But you'll notice a writer was not on the list. It wasn't anywhere on the list, actually, because even though I loved reading, I never thought about being a writer. But we would go to the library every weekend, my family. And the only rule was I had to carry my own books home, but it's okay because I was a pretty strong little kid. So I had a pretty good haul every weekend. And I went through Judy Blume, Beverly Cleary, went to the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, and then I got to, Lois Duncan, Christopher Pike. So I was into thrillers and mysteries. And I would come home and I would sit on my rug and I would read. And hours would pass. My parents would send me to bed. I would go in, close the door, turn off the lights, get out the book that I'd smuggled in, get out my flashlight, and I would keep on going. And there are a few times, my dad was watching right now with my mom. He would catch me, but I always heard him coming, so I could turn off the flashlight, pretend I was asleep, and then I would hear, Linda, go to sleep. And I would, and then the next night, we'd be back at it, and I would just do it again. But here's the only memory I had of writing in elementary school. I had one of those worksheets in front of me. I was sitting in the classroom, and it had that rectangle at the top where you were supposed to draw a picture, had the line for the title, and then all the lines for the story. And so I'd done the assignment. I'm sitting there. I was looking over my finished work, and I thought, that's a pretty good picture, and I have really neat handwriting. But wow, this is a really boring story. And I looked through it, and that was the moment when I decided, I'm not a creative person. And this was the label that I gave myself. My teacher didn't give it to me. I gave it to myself, and I think she gave me an A on that assignment. But for some reason, this stuck. I had decided, and I was okay with it, that I was just not going to be creative. And so for the rest of high school, college, most of graduate school, I didn't try to write fiction stories. And I would every now and then I would write a poem, but I never really saw myself as a writer. And so what changed? Well, later on in grad school, I also became a mom. And I had to read a lot of picture books. And some of these picture books, I'm going to show you one of my favorites. This is Old Bear by Kevin Henkes. The art is beautiful. The writing is gorgeous. The message, it's simple, it's pure, it's so deep. And if I just read books like this, I would have been a very happy reader. But they say that every book must, find its audience. And some of the books that she chose, she was the perfect audience, and I was not. But she loved to read them over and over again. So it got to the point where she would come running up, and I'd see her book in her hand. I'd be like, no, wait. You know what? I will make up a story for you. I've got one. It features, little Emmy. And she's like, oh, okay. So I started making up these stories. And it got to the point where I was like, I should write these down. And so I did. And I don't know where I got this confidence, but I decided, I'm going to send it out. And so I was writing down these stories and I was sending them out. And I really had no idea what I was doing, right? If you think about a picture book, it's got maybe about 500 words in there for the age group I was writing for, maybe up to 1,000. But my story, Freddy's Superpower, had 1,200 words. They were all precious. I could not cut a single one. So I started sending that one out. I was writing some other ones, and I started getting my rejections back in. But along the way, I wrote Kevin Henkes, and I said, I love your stories. And, oh, by the way, I'm going to be a writer too. I'm not sure why I said that, but I told him this. And so I kept on writing. I kept on piling my rejections. And at some point I was like, okay, maybe this is silly. I should probably stop. But then Kevin Henkes wrote back. And so I saved this. You can see it was with Green Willow Books, and it's a form letter. But in the side, he wrote, Linda, good luck with your writing. And I was like, oh. He made it sound like writing is just something that you do, right? And that meant something to me because I didn't know any other writers. I knew my graduate school professors, and they wrote books, but they were different than the books that I wanted to write. And so all of a sudden, this made it feel just a little more legitimate. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm writing. Me and Kevin Henkes, we're writing. So I kept on going. And along the way, I had this idea for, actually, before that, I started to have some success. I actually got some stories, some short stories, some poems into some kids' magazines. And these are very sweet stories. I wrote about a hedgehog who was a mail carrier, but his uniform got dirty. The laundromat was closed, and he needed a new uniform. And his sister, who was an opera singer, had costumes, so she helped him out. It all worked out. I wrote about an older sister who went to school, and the younger brother who wound up going to the same school, but he was a little bit nervous, and she didn't really want him there. But she noticed he was having a tough first day, and she blew kisses across the playground until they both felt better. And so these kind of fit the image. These are the stories I thought I'm supposed to write this kind of story because I teach elementary school, I work in education, and I want to write the stories that kind of fit these classrooms that I spent so much time in. They're sweet and they're kind, and that was right for me. And so I started thinking, well, maybe I can write a longer story. And I had this idea, and so I wrote this middle grade story. And if you can think of a cliche or some kind of story trope, I got it in there. It had portals to another world. There was a dictatorial government that you had to overthrow. There was a very picturesque setting for camping in the woods, along with a very high-tech lab with lots of poisons. And they rode boats all over the place. I still don't know why. But I wrote that book, and I never sent it out. That was probably one of my better decisions. But what I realized is that I had written a book. It was beginning, middle, and end. I got stuck sometimes, and I wrote myself out of it. And so it made me think like, okay, this is something I can do. And at this time, I hadn't really considered writing young adult. My kids were too young for that age category. I was teaching 6th grade, so I knew middle grade well. But I did start to read some young adult, and I liked it, but it didn't fit this image of the sweet kind of stories that I was trying to write. And also along the way, oh, here we go. Freddy's Superpower, remember that one? I had been tinkering with it. It got accepted in the highlights for kids, and they made it kind of into this like comic book story. It's less than 300 words. It could have been, but I was thinking, well, maybe this is then what I should be doing. It's those sweet, kind stories. But then I picked up the young adult book, And if you like young adult and you haven't read this one, The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. It is, I thought it was incredible. It's a story about how every November there's this race. And the horses that run this race, they come out of the sea. And if you can catch one and you can train it and it doesn't kill you in the process, you have a chance of winning. And I just thought this idea was so fresh. The setting was just gorgeous. The characters, and you felt like they were your friends. And I loved this. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to make something like this. And that idea, I mean, I felt like it was the right one, but I felt like it was scary because they're killer horses. It's not a mail carrying hedgehog, right? So it's a little bit, I felt, different than what I would write. I mean, it's young adults. You're standing right on that cusp of adulthood. There's that push and pull of family and freedom, and you're trying to figure out who you are independent of what all those other expectations are that people have for you. And so I didn't know if this was really what was right for me, but I had an idea. And usually if I have an idea, it makes sense to go ahead and follow that. And so I wrote a story, and it was a dystopian. It was not a crooked mark. And I started sending this out. And for a lot of places, they have this policy that no response means no, that they have passed. And so I was getting a lot of silence. There was a lot of rejection. And so I started thinking again, well, maybe this isn't the right path to go on. And around this time, my husband actually gave me a book. It was Neil Gaiman's speech. It's the one he gave in 2012 at Philadelphia's University Arts Commencement. And in it, he talks about how any kind of creative work, it's kind of like you're on a desert island. And you're sitting there and you are just throwing these bottles out. And you are hoping that someone catches it and answers you someday. And that's very much what it felt like. But I also thought, well, if Neil Gaiman feels that way, it's probably part of the process. So I kept on going. And I was sending out this dystopian, and I started looking for my next idea. And so I was out driving one day. I think I was on the way to pick the kids up. And I saw this person walking, and they just had the most sour expression on their face. And I remember it stopped me, and I was thinking, wow, what could have gone wrong in this person's day that they feel this way? And I found that when I have questions like that, if I just let myself think of answers without censoring anything, you wind up in someplace kind of interesting. So I let the answers come, the very common ones where, well, maybe his car broke down and that's why he's out walking. Maybe an argument, a fight with a loved one. And I kept just going down the rabbit hole. And I got to, well, maybe the devil reached out. And he's just messing with this person. And that is why they're so upset. And then I thought, okay, well, fine. But then how did the devil get here? And I don't think this is a reflection of my driving, but I thought, well, accidents, right? And so at that moment, that was the seed for A Crooked Mark. And I knew that I had wanted to write a young adult. And this idea of Matt as my main character came to me. And the story, I kind of took off from there. And so when I say took off, I did check my laptop, and my first draft, I saved it in 2016. So when I say took off, it did not go very fast. And so what happened? They say writers tend to fall into two groups. We're pantsers or plotters. And so if you're a pantser, you tend to write by the seat of your pants. You know the scene that you're writing, you know kind of what's happening next, but not much further along. But if you keep doing that, eventually you get to the end. And it's a great way to write. It's very organic because your story just kind of develops. Your characters are building and flowing. And if you're a plotter, you tend to outline first. And so you will know kind of where the story's going. You've thought it all the way through. It can be a more efficient way to write, but sometimes if you're writing and you're adhering to an outline, if the story could possibly take a turn and go this way, and your outline goes this way, you might miss a turn, and it might have been more interesting. So there's advantages, disadvantages to both. You just have to find out what works for you, right? So I decided that I was going to be a plotter. I liked the idea of writing from an outline, planning out first, and I also liked that if I was outlining, I didn't actually have to write, so I could procrastinate that part. So I was going to outline. So I sat down, I wrote the beginning, I had the end, and I had like 3 things in the middle. So that's a very sparse outline. So I worked on this for a little while, and it remained sparse. I got a few more things down. And then finally I was like, I need to start writing. So I I am going to be a hybrid. I am going to be part plotter, but also part pantser, and we're going to go. So I started writing, and it actually worked. I finished a draft, and then I went back, and I filled in all the plot holes, because there were a lot. And I finished it, and I read it, and it just felt flat. And I couldn't quite figure out why it wasn't working. And so I played with it. I was working on revising, and I couldn't get it to the level I wanted it to. And at this time, I was lucky enough to get into a mentorship program called Pitch Wars. And they ended it. But what it was you had writers who were further along in their career. They'd either published a book, or they're well on their way. And they were willing to donate their time. They were volunteers, and they would help the writers who were still starting out. And I had two wonderful mentors. I had Heather Zell and Rachel Griffin. And they came and they said, we like what you're doing. It's a great idea. But have you thought about making your protagonist a female? I was like, no, I haven't. And so I thought about that, and I was like, I'm really stuck. So let's go ahead and try this. And so we did. And even though I ended up changing it back, it did let me see that the kind of the giant hole of what the story was missing. And what it was that everything had focused on plot. I had where the story was going, what was being son of the devil, what was going to happen next. And all of this, it is good, and it's important, and it's necessary, but it's not enough. You have to have an internal arc also. Because if Matt's just some guy going through the emotions, then we're going through the motions, there's no emotional investment. You don't really care what happens to them. So for example, if you're watching a movie, a TV show, and there is a person with a knife hiding behind the door, that's not that scary. They're just standing there with a knife. The fear comes because there's a character that you care about, that you're invested in, who's about to walk through that door. And you would very much like them not to get stabbed. So that's what I was missing in A Crooked Mark. And I think that perhaps I've been trying to have kind of avoid this internal arc, because for me, that is the more difficult story, because Matt's facing some very big questions. There's the questions of, well, why do bad things happen to good people? What if I trusted someone, but now I'm wondering if they're really worthy of the trust? If I tell lies, but I tell them for a good reason, am I still a good person? And when does that line begin to blur? So they tell writers, write what you know. And I've never hunted the devil. But I do know those feelings that come with those questions. I know the doubt and the fear, the uncertainty. I know how it feels when you think, I might have done something wrong. And that sinking feeling when you're like, I may have to do something that I don't want to do. Those are uncomfortable feelings. Those are hard. But it was only when I started to let myself feel that and really dive into the character and put that on the page, the story started to work. And so I hope that in the end, it led to me writing something that would make you feel something too when you read it. And so what I learned from this book is, there's no shortcut around that. There's no shortcut around, you have to do the plot, but you also have to do the emotional arc. And I learned that these ideas I had about what I could write and whether or not I was a creative person, that's changed. That's changed along the way. They've grown. And if you told me 10 years ago that this was the book that I was going to be holding in my hands, I would not have believed you. But I'm glad I said yes to the ideas, to the emotions, even when they're scary. I hope I say yes to the next idea that's scary, because that's how I get to share moments like this with you. So if you don't mind, I'd like to share just the beginning of my book. So the epigraph is, the devil's finest trick is to persuade you that he does not exist. That's Charles Baudelaire in Paris Spleen. Chapter 1. I don't know how it feels when the devil scratches a soul. My father says he must have the lightest touch, because no one ever notices his crooked claw leave a stain on something that should belong only to them. They smile their old smiles, crack the same jokes, eat and play and work and laugh just as they used to, but the mark festers inside, growing and feeding like a parasite. By the time anyone notices something's wrong, it's too late. Lucifer already won. Not tonight, though. I brace myself in the passenger seat as a car bounces down the moonlit road. Dad killed the headlights a mile back, And if we hadn't driven this way hundreds of times before, we would have run straight into a tree by now. Yet 9 months of careful work have given us plenty of hours to prepare. By the time we finished documenting sweet Mrs. Polly's chilling descent from lucky survivor of a restaurant explosion to heartless killer marked by Lucifer, Dad had it all planned out. The matches sit in the console between us. My mouth turns sour as my stomach gives another heave, and I clamp my teeth together, waiting for it to pass. 9 months of getting to know someone has a way of bleeding into an accidental friendship, making an already impossible job even harder. In the dim light, the determined line of Dad's jaw holds only cold certainty, but doubt shrieks at me like a knife on glass. It's not easy to judge a soul. I have to give Lucifer credit. There might not be any serpent in the tree or horned man with a pitchfork, but he's still banging on our door. He's just gotten a whole lot more creative. Clever bastard found a brand new way to wreak havoc in the human world. Accidents. The semi-truck bearing down on your car. The train you thought you can beat across the tracks. The safety harness that snaps halfway up the mountain. One moment you're in this world, and then, bam, hello, afterlife. There's a split second, however, when you aren't quite in either. You're right in the middle of the jump, eyes squeeze shut, and both feet in the air, so you never see Lucifer extend a slender finger. It's a delicate scrape, the smallest mark on your soul, and then he sends you back. You're alive, and everyone calls it a miracle, but God had nothing to do with it. It's something much, much worse. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
Okay, you said the first draft was 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us which number this draft is?
It's 20 something, but I tend to save kind of sporadically. Oh, I did learn also you should always back up. So yes, that was important also. But yeah, it's like.
Did you do a full rewrite when you would draft, or did you more like revise bit by bit, or what was your process like?
It was more, I would save the new draft every time there was something big that I did. So if I was just wordsmithing, I wouldn't. But if I felt like, all right, we're going to cut a whole scene, and I did have that whole like deleted documents, and I always saved everything I deleted. I never wound up putting it back in, but I felt better saving it. But if I made a big change, that was when I would save it again. Yeah.
Question from one of our internet audience members. A praise then question. This is the first time I've ever finished reading a book and then immediately started reading it all over again because it was that good. Well done, Linda. Will there be a sequel?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. Sequel, I don't know. I don't know yet. I'm thinking, and the answer is, well, not yet. I don't know. I am working on another young adult, but it is not related. It's also contemporary. It's set in our world, tilted a little bit sideways. It's about sisters and starlight and murder. But so that would probably be my next one. But I haven't closed the door on something else in the Quick Mark world. Yes.
It's scary. And so did you scare yourself while you were writing?
Every now and then I would, but I would just pull back and be like, wait, I'm making this up. This is okay. So I think that I felt that I was always in control of it. Did I cry at some points when I was writing? Was I feeling something? Yes, I did. And that was part of putting those emotions on the page. But yeah, thank you. Yes.
I know of about 4 at least books that you've written, not published yet, but I was wondering how many ideas you have. I mean, do you have like 100 and you just pick which one to go with right now?
I wish. So Scott and Cindy and Laura, they're part of my writing group. They're absolutely fantastic. Been together for years, so they have read lots of my writing, and they've helped me tremendously. I don't think I have that many. I usually feel better if I have something that I can think about, because I think for me at least, I don't start writing until I have a pretty good sense of how that story is going to go. I won't outline the whole thing. I might jot down some ideas, but I like to be able to have the idea and then just have it in the back of my head so that if I'm doing something and if I'm taking a walk, I'm going on a run, I can kind of just think about it and think about how that might develop. And then it's easy to tell myself, I only need one idea. I just need one thing to think about, and then I'm okay. Yes.
Question from our internet audience. What was your research process like, and did you read other YA books or avoid them while writing?
Good questions. The research project, that was interesting because I was researching, at one point I think I was looking at cults and Lucifer, and that was interesting. I kind of went down the rabbit hole on that one too. But that was primarily the research that I was doing, is looking at what's been done before, what's been done in this area, and then did I stop reading YA? I did not. I tried to stay away from young adult books that were very similar in the same genre, but I did really just like reading young adult, and I like hearing the dialogue and seeing the problems and seeing how other authors address these things. And so I tried to read widely. I read middle grade, I read adult books, but I did not stop. Yeah.
You mentioned Maggie Seafader.
Mm-hmm.
Who else do you like to read? And I would love to hear all those categories.
Oh.
Middle grade, young adult.
Let me think. Well, I have to say middle grade, my favorite book is Holes, and I actually didn't read that till I was an adult. And I love that one. And the middle grade that I'm working on right now, I would comp it to Holes. I just read 9 Liars by, was it Maureen Johnson? Love her. And I read for the adult book, Remarkably Bright Creatures. Have you read that one? It is told from multiple points of view, one of which is an octopus, and it totally works. It's brilliantly done. So that was a great one.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Again, from our internet audience, in retrospect, what was the most difficult part of the writing process?
There were some parts I really liked that really didn't belong in there. And once you've written them and it's on your screen, and this is why I had my deleted scenes document. It was going through, and because I had some ideas early on that got into the manuscript, and then later on reading it, it's like, it doesn't quite fit. And so you pull it out, it's living in the other document, and I'm telling myself, that's okay, it'll go into like another book. But that was probably the hardest part, is those parts that meant something to me that didn't make it to the final draft.
What was your process like after Pitch Wars and still revising? Like, was this the first book? Right? Is this what you got agented with? Like, what was that process like? And when did you find out that you had sold the book?
I went to the Andrea Brown, the Big Sur conference, and I met a wonderful agent, Jennifer March-Holloway, who I had sent this to her before, and she had given me some excellent feedback. And I was, my only goal for this conference, like, okay, I'm gonna talk to her. I'm a huge introvert. I'm gonna talk to her. And by the end of the second day, I'm like, maybe I'll just wave at her. But then we were sitting there waiting for a speech, and she said, stand next to me. So I said, okay, the universe is talking. So I introduced myself and I talked to her, and I said, well, would you mind if I sent it to you again? I have it in Pitch Wars. And she said, sure, send it to me. She's absolutely lovely. And so I talked with her, and that was she understood what I was trying to do. And that was why she's a fantastic agent. She helped me bring the book up to another level. And then from there, we probably worked together over a year before it did sell. So it was a process for sure. Yeah.
From our internet audience, are there any other genres you want to explore as a writer?
I don't know yet. I think I feel like I'm new to this. And I do know that I like writing in that contemporary world. I like a little hint of magic, a little bit of mystery to it. And I do like the suspense. And so I think I would pursue that in my young adult. At the middle grade that I'm working on, it's, there is that air of mystery, but it's a little gentler. but I would never say no to anything at this point, but I think for right now, I'm staying here.
One more from our internet audience. What advice do you have for other aspiring authors looking to start their journey?
Good question. I would say read a lot and write, and don't ever tell yourself that you're not a creative person. Don't, other people are going to say no. Don't say no to yourself, right? So be willing to write and then put yourself out there. And if someone says no, that's fine. Someone else will say yes. You just keep going and you believe in yourself. Yes.
One question that we usually like to ask for Mysterious Galaxy is, aside from your book, if you had to give someone a book that you felt best represented you, what would that book be?
I read All These Bodies by Kendara Blake, and that feels similar in that the premise there is there have been all these murders happening, and they find the bodies drained of blood. And now, and I'm not giving anything away, this happens like chapter 1. There is a girl found at one of the murders covered in blood. And the question is she a victim? Is she guilty somehow? And there's a boy who must interview her. She chooses him as her interviewer and tell her story. And along the way, he's trying to figure out, well, what's true? What's not? What do I believe? And I think that question kind of runs through A Crooked Mark also.
We have another one from our online audience. Your book contains a lot heavier emotions. Was it difficult as a writer to create characters that conveyed those emotions in a realistic way?
Yes. In a nutshell, yes. Because in order to create those characters, like I was saying, you have to feel that. And so there were some scenes that, they were harder. And some of those big questions, those are questions that I don't have answers to as an adult. And so sitting there thinking about them and then trying to put them on paper, put them in my laptop, those were hard writing moments.
One thing we also have noticed, especially for a lot of YA authors these days, they'll get into kind of a music headspace and they'll listen to certain soundtracks or even albums. Did you find yourself listening to any particular type of music while writing this, or did you perchance write a playlist for this book?
I did not write a playlist for this. I actually, when I'm writing, I usually don't listen to music. I don't like other words that aren't mine in my head. So if I'm listening, it's probably instrumental. I do listen to I think a lot of Coldplay came out and just something a little more, I tried to listen to something a little more light and inspiring. It just helped me when I was writing. So yeah.
Another online question. As an author of YA, did you find it hard to maintain that line between YA and adult? And where is that line for you?
That's a great question. And I say this as a mom of teens. To me, I did not have such a hard time maintaining that line. And part of it was also the characters that I chose, because Matt he's been homeschooled this whole time. And now as he's starting his project, it's okay, this is on my page 20. He's gonna be entering high school. And so he does come at it perhaps a more innocent point of view than someone who had already been in high school the whole time. But it did give me a kind of a clear boundary about where he was starting for young adults.
Did you ever pick the brains of your own children about the modern dialogue or certain words that teenagers would say? Or
Yes, well, it's funny because this one, like I said, it started in 2016. So then not so much, but now I'm able to go out and be like, so if you're texting, how do you say this? Because I don't know what. And so now they're very helpful and said, do people use this word anymore? And they'll both look at me like, no, Mom. Okay, I'm good. So yeah, so now they're very helpful. Yes.
As an author, creative writer, novelist, what are your thoughts about ChatGPT?
Ooh. I think it's been funny because I heard about it and then I see my kids using it in school and it's very useful. Well, no. It's more the kind of thing where they're not using it now. But it's the kind of thing where I think that it can be useful as far as it can look at information and it can synthesize very well, right? And so I know part of the fear then is that, well, if it looks at all these different works by different people and it can synthesize, can it create something new? And I don't think it's quite there yet. I don't think it can be as original as people can be. I'd be curious to see where it goes, but I don't think we're there quite yet. Sorry, no, you were. They don't use them that way. Yes.
From our online audience, do you ever find yourself ever writing bits of yourself and life into your stories?
Oh, yes. Yes, I try not to so much, but at the same time, when I'm sitting there and I'm drawing on, I'm trying to come up with a scene or something, your experiences, they do come through, and I'm sure that I come through in my characters. There are parts of me, I think, kind of scattered throughout the book. There's a little bit of my childhood and some of the scenery. So, yeah, I'd say it comes through.
I think I saw another hand in the audience here go up a moment ago. No? Change your mind? Okay.
You probably told me before, but do you use any tools other than Microsoft Word, let's say, to do your writing in, or do you do it in Pages? Do you use Scrivener, any of these other tools?
No, I do it in Microsoft Word, but the one thing I do have is I have a giant poster board in my office with the fold-out sides, and I have it divided into like four kind of areas. So I have Act 1. This is based on Save the Cat. So if anyone's a writer and you want a good book for crafts, Save the Cat is fantastic. So I have Act 1, and then I have 2 lines for Act 2. It's got the midpoint. It's got that moment in the story where everything is lost, and then it's got the last act. And so those are probably my tools. So I will sit there with just Microsoft Word and my poster board.
Got any last minute questions, anyone? I always find it interesting to want to know if Desert Island, what would be your Desert Island picks? Pick 3 books that if you can only read them, Desert Island, where are you going for?
I would go for, well, I would take Old Bear with me because it makes me feel good. I would probably take, I have been working my way through the Sun Bear trials, so I would take that and finish that. And I think I would take Bird by Bird by Emma Mott. It's a story about how to write and how it's the title comes from her brother had to write a very long report on birds. Of course, he waits for the day before it's due, and his dad says to him, "Bird by bird, just take it bird by bird." And it's a great story about writing and about life, and I think I would be happy my Desert Island.
Any last questions? All right, everyone, let's give Linda a nice round of applause. Linda, congrats. It's a long time coming for you to come out with your book, but I'm so glad that you were able to find what you felt was needed for your story. And thank you again for being a part of Mysterious Galaxy now. Yay!
Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for coming out. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
All right, our virtual audience, we're going to go ahead and end the stream now. Don't forget, you can still get your copies of A Crooked Mark. And for those of you in store, we get to start the signing. Bye, everyone.